Good morning. We're here with General Daniel, General Daniel Hokanson, Chief of the National Guard Bureau, member of the Joint Chief of Staff, alongside Kentucky Adjutant General Haldane Lamberton. They're going to speak for a little bit on what they've seen here today. There may be time for a few questions after, but time is limited.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name's Dan Hokanson. I'm the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, and I had the opportunity to leave Washington, D.C., come down to see the level of devastation here in Kentucky, and also to visit with our Kentucky National Guardsmen that have responded really since the beginning of this. And first and foremost, I want to say I had a chance to fly in, and my thoughts and prayers from the entire National Guard go out to the entire community, everybody here that was impacted. And it's one of those things, when you see this on television, it's not the same as physically being here and looking at the path of destruction that this tornado has made. I've been to a lot of disasters. This is one of the worst that I've seen. But on the other hand, I've seen some great work. So many volunteers, so many people within the community, without being asked, showed up immediately to help out with the response. And I got to go to one of the distribution centers today. The level of donations and just support to the community, the outpouring has been incredible, and it's just something that our whole nation should be proud of. But once again, it's a long way ahead. The level of devastation is significant, not just in the immediate term for those that are immediately impacted, but also for the long-term communities and the businesses here. So I'd like to hand it over to General Lamberton, the Adjutant General for the Kentucky, and then we'll take a couple of questions after that. So, Al?
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. Just to share some information with everybody for what the Kentucky National Guard is doing, and I'd offer your National Guard at this junction. So we currently have a presence in 11 counties that have been impacted here in the state, with a total of currently 695 soldiers and airmen who are responding in a variety of capacities. Some of you may already very much be aware of, but we initially stood up our own operations center virtually within about 60 minutes of the first reports of the storm and its damage impacting the area. Subsequently, you may have seen where our folks responding to the storm damage, and each of the 11 counties I just mentioned has been kind of an evolutionary process. Initially, we were standing up our operations, getting folks in the immediate area responsive to what's going on. Initially, some of our missions in particular were search and rescue missions, and in particular to help those who had been impacted by the storm but weren't capable of extracting themselves. That kind of evolved into a search and recovery mission, which a number of you, I'm sure most folks are already very much familiar with, maybe too familiar with the candle factory here in Mayfield. But my understanding, that is no longer a recovery effort, as all of the folks have been identified or accounted for from that one site itself. But that said as well, that doesn't mean that the accountability is not still an issue. As many of you are aware, we have power outages still that are prevalent throughout much of the area. We have issues with cell phone service. We have issues with being able to get out and get accountability of some of these people that the local leadership has not been able to track down by name. So towards that end, two efforts in particular, and some of you may be aware that there are public service announcements that the local leadership has put out, encouraging everybody to come on in to some of the sites here in town and actually just kind of sign off on a list so the local authorities have visibility on people. But even still, here I'm talking about the people in the rural area. You get out to, in the urban area, you get out to some of the more rural areas, and especially where communication, cell phone service is more of an issue. So towards that end, we've got some of our own guardsmen, and in particular, a lot of our MPs and security force out of the air wing working with local law enforcement. And this is everybody from the chief of police here in Mayfield to working with Kentucky State Police, to go out to designated areas and actually do door knocks, or as our governor said at times, to knock on something because the door is no longer there at this junction. So we're reaching out, and here, I'm kind of focusing what I'm sharing with you on Mayfield and Graves County, but we've got 10 other counties. We're doing pretty much the same thing, where a little bit ago I mentioned the progressive dynamic of search and rescue to search and recovery, and now we're in a little bit more of a law enforcement mode. Doing the wellness checks, doing the accountability functions. Here, as you see, by virtue of some of our up-armored Humvees providing what we call TCPs, or traffic control points, to just kind of control and, if not restrict, who's getting into the given areas, and working directly with both the state police again and local law enforcement here in Mayfield, in Dawson Springs, and the other 9 communities where we have a presence, to also provide some degree of law enforcement, because as you might imagine, with this type of dynamic, looting is also a concern. So towards that end, we're providing active patrols, we're providing a deterrence as far as a physical presence to discourage folks from going into looting any of these areas. And again, all of this is being done in conjunction with local law enforcement, because when we go to work along these lines, it's not our MPs, it's not our security force guys doing so independently, but we very much stay engaged with the local community leadership. And towards that end, let me also say that in each one of the impacted communities, we've got what we call an LNO, or a liaison officer. And that liaison's primary purpose is to get face-to-face with the county judge executive, the local mayor, the local police chief, the local fire chief. So they've got somebody they can go to for whatever issue they may have at hand. And this may provide a certain redundancy of communication, but in this type of scenario, as you can imagine, just the systems that we've got in place to communicate with one another, redundancy is a good thing. We've got, I would say, and I'll wrap this up, and then any questions that you all may have for General Hokanson or myself, this is really very much an all of government type of response. It's not just the folks here at the local level, the mayor here in Mayfield, the Judge Perry, the county judge executive, but the folks at the state level. There are multiple state cabinets who are currently engaged with this. Obviously, the National Guard, Emergency Management, Department of Transportation, the Department of Tourism, which, as some of you know, they've opened up all the state parks to displaced folks at this junction to give them a roof and a warm place to stay as needed, but even the federal level as well for FEMA. And again, it's not just the people communicating at each one of those levels, but it's the vertical communication as well. So Hal Lamberton's perspective is that all the systems are in place, all the communication is taking place. Are there issues? Will there still be issues? Absolutely. But I think the experienced people, the systems, the organizations are all in place to address not just today's situation, but as this continues to evolve. And it won't just be the next few days or the next few weeks, but I think we in some communities like Mayfield here will be dealing with this for months yet to come. Thank you.
So, are we seeing looting, and also there is a lot of rain expected to come in this area over the next few days. Is that going to create even more of a problem than what we're already seeing?
Yes, straightforward. But in this area, and let me qualify, so the most immediate concern, and it's not just the wind, or pardon me, not just the rain, but the associated wind with it as well. Fortunately, and from my perspective, because here in Western Kentucky we've got more low-level, relatively flat land, I'm not immediately looking at flooding as being an issue. But think of it, we got folks who, being able to live in their homes, it's really kind of a tenuous situation anyways. The rain and piles of rain being dumped on top of their homes makes it even more hazardous to continue to use. So I would speculate that further housing for displaced folks will be an issue in the next 48 hours for the storms coming in this area. Yes. That I personally know of, I can only identify about 3 or so, but that sort of information doesn't flow through me. You know, those reports, as they come up from the local police authorities or from authorities. I just hear, as I mentioned ago, that we've got our own guardsmen who live right here in Mayfield, and some of them have shared stories with me, and it's not quite where you're going with your question, but just you open the door there. So, you know, the neat thing is with the Guard, these are the same communities that we not only work in, we live in, and that's part of the compelling story of the National Guard, that, you know, for the men and women in the Guard, that they're here because they want to be part of community service somehow. So as unfortunate of an incident as this is why men and women join the National Guard.
I want to round back to the looting aspect. What would you say to people who are, I mean, this is the stuff that belongs to people. It's part of their lives, their hearts. What would you say to the folks who want to capitalize on that?
Unfortunately, I think you're right that there are folks who will do that, you know, whether it's the looting we just mentioned, or we've heard reports, and you may have even heard it from some communications from both the governor and the attorney general for potential scammers who set up donation sites, giving the pretense that the folks may be donating to some sort of relief effort in reference to this. I think, unfortunately, that's a part of our human dynamic, that people always try to take advantage of that situation. That said, however, though, I do believe firmly that that's the minority of the folks who are in our communities or in our population. You know, majority of the folks that we've got, shoot, on the counter side, look at all of the individuals or the organizations, not just here in the near term, but statewide and even beyond the state borders, who are donating material, whether it's food, water. I'd shared with General Hokanson a little bit ago, a CEO from a national food company who's actually beginning today, I believe, serving sandwiches and meals here in the area, and just simply said it would be done open-ended until there's not a need any longer.
To keep the people who might have ill will in line, that's one of the reasons you all are here, watchful eyes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Is the Guard still involved in active search and recovery efforts?
Yes, we are, but let me qualify that as well. You know, like I cited the example with the candle factory. Even the dynamic of the search and recovery has changed, and towards those efforts, it's in conjunction with the wellness checks that I mentioned, where we're reaching out beyond just the immediate impacted areas and going out into the community and the more rural areas to physically check up on folks that there's been no communication with. Because as you're probably aware of, you know, for a while there were a number of people unaccounted for with the candle factory. Well, we're expanding that to the rest of the community, to the rest of the county, and let me share as well, we're even checking with some of the adjacent counties that have not been impacted that we're aware of, just to kind of close the loop, to say that, hey, we've got accountability on everybody, not just in this immediate area, but in the region beyond it.
We have time for two more questions. Two more questions.
Men and women on the ground are more expected, more guardsmen and women. Are they all from Kentucky or are they coming from other states as well?
Right now, we have 690 folks, Kentucky Guardsmen, Army and Air, who are in the impacted area, and that's the 11 counties. We have several hundred more Kentucky Guardsmen who are just in sort of a standby notice. So what I'm getting to answer your question is that we still very much have the capability here in Kentucky to respond to it, even if it goes beyond that 695 that I just mentioned. But in speaking with General Hokanson as well, as a lot of you all are probably tracking, this is going to be a long-term dynamic. So the prospect of sustaining a National Guard presence in the upcoming months, that possibly could go beyond just the Kentucky National Guard, but as the whole thing is kind of a evolutionary process, it's a TBD or to be determined dynamic.
General Hoganson, you've seen a lot, you've been through a lot of tragedy.
Sure.
What is it about Kentucky here and the response that's different from other places?
So when you look at the scale and how long that tornado was on the ground and the duration and just the impact of the communities, and like many communities across the United States, the response that we see is really incredible. And with the Kentucky National Guard, as they mentioned, they had folks showing up for duty without being asked because they wanted to make a difference. And many of our guardsmen, they would show up at locations with their equipment. Farmers would be there to help out because they knew it was an emergency. And then when you go to like the donation sites, I mean, just everybody coming together. In fact, they've told me there's a lot of volunteers here. People really want to make a difference. And when you look at the impact to the families here, you know, we're less than 10 days from Christmas. It's going to be a different Christmas here, but I think everyone is trying to do the best they can. That's a beauty of our country.
That's all. Thank you all. That's all we have time for today. If you all have any further questions, you can reach out to the Kentucky National Guard PAO, and we can get you some of the specifics that you need. Kentucky National Guard PAO will be off to the side for any questions, contact information, media advisors that you may need. Thank you all.
Can you just answer
Great.
that one question about what
Thank
it
you.
was about Kentucky that made you want to see it here on the ground?
You know, when you see something on TV, it's not the same when you're physically here. And I know General Lamberton and the Kentucky Guard, right from the start, they were here, letting me know they were coming out there, and I was following it very closely. And when you see this, you want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help the area recover. And so, meeting with General Lamberton, I know they've got all the resources they need right now, but over time, this is going to go on for probably months. We want to make sure that we provide the support they need so that they can get this community back on their feet. Right. Thank you so much.
General, I just want to say hello real quick and give my regards on behalf of Foreign Lieberman who said hello. I will. Okay, thank you. Okay. That's me. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Sorry.